So resolving this origins debate, Jason Lisle lays out 3 criteria that we're going to look at together that a worldview must meet in order to be rational, to be logical, in order to be worthy of our acceptance. The first is consistency. As mentioned, the solution of the origins debate is not through competing evidence because of the reality of ultimate standards or worldviews through which we interpret all evidence to support our presupposed views. Therefore, the solution to this debate is first, consistency, or rather, it's assessing whether a worldview, an ultimate standard, is unhypocritical, non-self-contradictory. Lisle writes that a good worldview must be consistent. If a worldview has internal contradictions, then it cannot be correct, since contradictions cannot be true. If a worldview is self-contradictory or has absurd consequences, then it cannot be correct. For example, looking at the poor deluded man out on that precipice in the picture on the slide, this man holds secular presuppositions, like the worldview of relativism. Relativism, which most people in the West believe today, including most institutional Christians, shockingly, relativism is the belief that truth is relative, varying from person to person, and there are no absolutes. Relativism is, by definition, an inconsistent belief. When a relativist claims there are no absolutes, there is no absolute truth or reality, he or she is refuting him or herself even in saying that. It's a self-contradictory claim. Think about it for a moment. Just making the claim that there are no absolutes is an absolute claim. Relativists assert that it is absolutely true that truth is not absolute. It's an amazingly unself-aware statement to make that anyone would ever say. Imagine. And the natural response to such a claim is, don't you hear yourself? But most people in our once modern civilization in which we live affirm this self-refuting claim. John Locke, a biblical creationist who founded modern democracy in the 17th century, and Isaac Newton, a contemporary of his, a biblical creationist who founded modern science, never did and never would hold to a self-refuting, unbiblical belief like relativism. So it's a self-defeating, inconsistent, hypocritical worldview. When someone says it's all relative, there are no absolutes, we should respond, are you absolutely sure? You're refuting yourself by claiming absolutely that there are no absolutes. So because this secular worldview is self-negating, because the claim of relativism is demonstrably self-contradictory, it's inconsistent. It fails the consistency test. It's a false worldview. Relativism actually declares itself to be false. And the great Jason Lisle offers another false secular presupposition, empiricism, as another example of an inconsistent or self-refuting and therefore false worldview. Empiricism is the worldview that claims that all knowledge is gained through observation. Obviously, here again is a self-refuting, self-defeating claim. How on earth could the empiricist possibly verify his claim? How can he know that all knowledge is gained through observation? Knowledge can't be seen, can't be observed. Knowledge is invisible, it's abstract. By definition, it cannot be observed. So then how could anyone possibly know that empiricism itself is true if all things are indeed known by observation? Since knowledge cannot be observed, he can never prove his claim. The empiricist refutes himself. Or as we see in the picture here, the person holding secular presuppositions, anti-biblical, like relativism and empiricism, actually destroys himself. The man who's contradicting him or herself by holding anti-biblical views, as you can see in the picture, and as we'll discuss further hereafter, he or she must borrow from the truth, from Christian presuppositions, all the while he rejects the truth and thus defeats himself. He's inconsistent. Also note that for relativism and empiricism and all other non-biblical or anti-biblical worldviews, because their worldviews are fundamentally self-defeating, all the conclusions, all the other beliefs and ways of life built on those phony foundations are false and self-defeating as well. So for example, the empiricist will go on to say there can't be a God because I can't observe him anywhere. And the relativist will say I can do whatever I want, have, sex with as many people as I want, and murder the babies that come along because there are no absolute morals or rules of life. This person or that person is destroying him or herself and the lives of many others because they hold to false presuppositions that, if they were honest for a moment, would have to acknowledge that they're self-refuting. Therefore, in order for a worldview to be rationally defensible, says Lisle, it must be internally consistent. And only the Bible, only the biblical creation worldview is entirely consistent. However, this is only the first of 3 criteria for a reliable worldview. Alone, internal consistency does not guarantee that a worldview is correct. So let's look at the second criterion for a consistent, reliable, life-giving, and life-preserving worldview.